The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Rebecca Torres as she wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, careful not to smudge the remnants of her mascara any further than her morning tears already had. The playground at Riverside Park was nearly empty at 2:15 on a Wednesday, which was exactly why she'd chosen this time. Most kids were still in school, most parents still at work, and most importantly, there'd be fewer pitying stares when her daughter Maya threw one of her meltdowns. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Rebecca sat on a weathered bench, her purse open beside her, staring at the stack of bills she'd been avoiding all week. Past due notices from the electric company, a final warning from her landlord, and a medical bill from Maya's last specialist appointment that made her stomach turn every time she looked at the number. $3,472 for the doctor to tell her what she already knew. Her 6-year-old daughter was profoundly deaf, and the cochlear implant surgery that might help her cost more money than Rebecca would see in 5 years of working double shifts at the Silver Spoon Diner. "Mama," Maya's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. The little girl stood at the bottom of the slide, her dark curls bouncing as she signed with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Watch me, big slide." Rebecca forced a smile and signed back. "I'm watching, baby. Be careful." Maya's speech was limited, the words she could produce often unclear to anyone who didn't spend every day with her. But through sign language, she was eloquent, funny, and bright as the sun. Rebecca had learned ASL the moment the doctors confirmed Maya's diagnosis, had practiced until her hands cramped, had made sure her daughter would never feel unheard in a world that so often ignored people like her. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Rebecca watched Maya climb the ladder with fierce concentration, her small hands gripping each rung. At the top, she turned and signed "Ready?" with such joy that Rebecca's heart squeezed. This was why she kept going, why she worked the breakfast shift at the diner, then raced to pick Maya up from the deaf education program across town, then worked the dinner shift while her neighbor Mrs. Chen watched Maya for $20 she could barely afford. Every exhausting, soul-crushing moment was worth it to see her daughter's smile. But as Maya slid down with a delighted shriek, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from her landlord. "Final notice. Pay by Friday or eviction proceedings begin Monday. 3 days." She had 3 days to come up with 2 months' rent, or she and Maya would be on the street. Rebecca closed her eyes and tried to remember the last time she'd felt anything other than bone-deep exhaustion. It had been 2 years since Maya's father David walked out, unable to handle a defective kid as he'd so charmingly put it. 2 years of doing this alone, of being both mother and father, of stretching every dollar until it screamed, of lying awake at night wondering if she was enough. The truth was, she wasn't sure she was. "Mama, swing!" Maya signed, running over with flushed cheeks. "Push me high." Rebecca tucked the bills back into her purse and stood, her waitress shoes pinching her feet after the morning shift. "Okay, baby. As high as the clouds?" Maya's face lit up. "Higher, to the moon." As Rebecca pushed her daughter on the swing, listening to Maya's laughter, she let herself pretend for just a moment that everything was okay. That the bills didn't exist, that they had a safe home, that her daughter's future wasn't an endless series of obstacles and closed doors. She was so focused on Maya that she almost didn't notice the black SUV that pulled into the parking lot, or the way every other parent in the park suddenly gathered their children and left with unusual haste. She almost didn't see the 3 men in dark suits who emerged first, scanning the area with the practiced efficiency of trained security. Almost. But then she saw the boy. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, with dark hair that fell across his forehead, and eyes that held a sadness so profound it made Rebecca's chest ache. The boy climbed out of the SUV behind a tall man in an expensive charcoal suit, and even from 50 feet away, Rebecca could see the tension in both their postures. The man, clearly the boy's father, placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder and said something Rebecca couldn't hear. The boy nodded, but his small body was rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. They walked toward the playground equipment, the 3 security men maintaining a discreet perimeter that was anything but subtle. Rebecca watched as the father led his son to the swing set, just 2 down from where Maya was still soaring through the air. The boy sat on the swing but didn't move, didn't pump his legs, just sat there with his head down, small shoulders hunched. The father crouched beside him, speaking quietly. Rebecca couldn't hear the words, but she could see the love and frustration warring on the man's face. After a moment, he stood and pulled out his phone, moving a few feet away to take a call. One of the security men stayed close to the boy, but maintained enough distance to give the illusion of privacy. That's when Rebecca saw the tears. The boy was crying, silently, his small hands gripping the chains of the swing so tightly his knuckles had gone white. His shoulders shook with suppressed sobs, but he made no sound. And what broke Rebecca's heart was that no one seemed to notice. The security guard was watching the perimeter, not the boy. The father was absorbed in his phone call, his back turned. The boy was surrounded by people paid to protect him, yet he was completely, utterly alone. Rebecca knew that feeling. She'd lived it every day since David left. "Maya, baby," Rebecca signed. "Stay on the swing for 1 minute, okay? I need to check on someone." Maya nodded, content to swing herself now. Rebecca approached the boy slowly, not wanting to startle him or alarm the security. As she got closer, she noticed details that made her teacher's instincts fire. The way his hands moved slightly, forming shapes even as they gripped the chains. The way his lips moved soundlessly, as if he were trying to speak but couldn't. The absolute isolation in his posture. She'd seen this before, during her brief. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Rebecca Torres as she wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, careful not to smudge the remnants of her mascara any further than her morning tears already had. The playground at Riverside Park was nearly empty at 2:15 on a Wednesday, which was exactly why she'd chosen this time. Most kids were still in school, most parents still at work, and most importantly, there'd be fewer pitying stares when her daughter Maya threw one of her meltdowns. Rebecca sat on a weathered bench, her purse open beside her, staring at the stack of bills she'd been avoiding all week. Past due notices from the electric company, a final warning from her landlord, and a medical bill from Maya's last specialist appointment that made her stomach turn every time she looked at the number. $3,472 for the doctor to tell her what she already knew. Her 6-year-old daughter was profoundly deaf, and the cochlear implant surgery that might help her cost more money than Rebecca would see in 5 years of working double shifts at the Silver Spoon Diner. "Mama!" Maya's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. The little girl stood at the bottom of the slide, her dark curls bouncing as she signed with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Watch me! Big slide!" Rebecca forced a smile and signed back. "I'm watching, baby. Be careful." Maya's speech was limited, the words she could produce often unclear to anyone who didn't spend every day with her. But through sign language, she was eloquent, funny, and bright as the sun. Rebecca had learned ASL the moment the doctors confirmed Maya's diagnosis, had practiced until her hands cramped, had made sure her daughter would never feel unheard in a world that so often ignored people like her. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Rebecca watched Maya climb the ladder with fierce concentration, her small hands gripping each rung. At the top, she turned and signed, "Ready?" with such joy that Rebecca's heart squeezed. This was why she kept going, why she worked the breakfast shift at the diner, then raced to pick Maya up from the deaf education program across town, then worked the dinner shift while her neighbor Mrs. Chen watched Maya for $20 she could barely afford. Every exhausting, soul-crushing moment was worth it to see her daughter's smile. But as Maya slid down with a delighted shriek, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from her landlord. "Final notice. Pay by Friday or eviction proceedings begin Monday. 3 days." She had 3 days to come up with 2 months' rent, or she and Maya would be on the street. Rebecca closed her eyes and tried to remember the last time she'd felt anything other than bone-deep exhaustion. It had been 2 years since Maya's father David walked out, unable to handle a defective kid, as he'd so charmingly put it. 2 years of doing this alone, of being both mother and father, of stretching every dollar until it screamed, of lying awake at night wondering if she was enough. The truth was, it wasn't sure she was. "Mama, swing!" Maya signed, running over with flushed cheeks. "Push me high." Rebecca tucked the bills back into her purse and stood, her waitress shoes pinching her feet after the morning shift. "Okay, baby. As high as the clouds?" Maya's face lit up. "Higher! To the moon!" As Rebecca pushed her daughter on the swing, listening to Maya's laughter, she let herself pretend for just a moment that everything was okay, that the bills didn't exist, that they had a safe home, that her daughter's future wasn't an endless series of obstacles and closed doors. She was so focused on Maya that she almost didn't notice the black SUV that pulled into the parking lot, or the way every other parent in the park suddenly gathered their children and left with unusual haste. She almost didn't see the three men in dark suits who emerged first, scanning the area with the practiced efficiency of trained security. Almost. But then she saw the boy. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that held a sadness so profound it made Rebecca's chest ache. The boy climbed out of the SUV behind a tall man in an expensive charcoal suit, and even from 50 feet away, Rebecca could see the tension in both their postures. The man, clearly the boy's father, placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder and said something Rebecca couldn't hear. The boy nodded, but his small body was rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. They walked toward the playground equipment, the 3 security men maintaining a discreet perimeter that was anything but subtle. Rebecca watched as the father led his son to the swing set, just 2 down from where Maya was still soaring through the air. The boy sat on the swing but didn't move, didn't pump his legs, just sat there with his head down, small shoulders hunched. The father crouched beside him, speaking quietly. Rebecca couldn't hear the words, but she could see the love and frustration warring on the man's face. After a moment, he stood and pulled out his phone, moving a few feet away to take a call. One of the security men stayed close to the boy, but maintained enough distance to give the illusion of privacy. That's when Rebecca saw the tears. The boy was crying, silently, his small hands gripping the chains of the swing so tightly his knuckles had gone white. His shoulders shook with suppressed sobs, but he made no sound. And what broke Rebecca's heart was that no one seemed to notice. The security guard was watching the perimeter, not the boy. The father was absorbed in his phone call, his back turned. The boy was surrounded by people paid to protect him, yet he was completely, utterly alone. Rebecca knew that feeling. She'd lived it every day since David left. Maya, baby. Rebecca signed. Stay on the swing for 1 minute, okay? I need to check on someone. Maya nodded, content to swing herself now. Rebecca approached the boy slowly, not wanting to startle him or alarm the security. As she got closer, she noticed details that made her teacher's instincts fire. The way his hands moved slightly, forming shapes even as they gripped the chains. The way his lips moved soundlessly, as if he were trying to speak but couldn't. The absolute isolation in his posture. She'd seen this before, during her brief stint as a teacher's aide at Chicago's School for the Deaf, before budget cuts eliminated her position. This boy wasn't just sad. He was trapped in silence, desperately trying to communicate with a world that couldn't or wouldn't understand him. Rebecca stopped a few feet away and waited until the boy looked up. His dark eyes were red, rimmed, and filled with such hopelessness that she felt her own eyes sting with sympathy. Then she lifted her hands and signed, "Hi, my name is Rebecca. Are you okay?" The transformation was instant and breathtaking. The boy's entire face changed. His eyes went wide, his mouth dropped open in shock, and for a moment, he just stared at her as if she were an apparition. Then his hands flew into motion, signing so fast and desperately that Rebecca had to ask him to slow down. "You can see me?" he signed, tears still streaming down his face. "You can understand me?" "Yes," Rebecca signed back, her heart breaking at the raw need in his gestures. "I can see you and I can understand you perfectly. What's your name?" "Dante." The boy signed, and then his hands moved faster, the dam breaking. "No one ever understands me. They look at me but they don't see me. Papa tries, but he only knows a little bit of signing, and everyone else is scared of me because of who my papa is, and I'm so lonely and I miss my mama and—" "Slow down, sweetheart," Rebecca signed gently, moving closer and crouching to his level. "Take a breath. I'm here. I'm listening." Dante's hands trembled as he tried to control himself. "You're really here? You're not going to leave when you find out who my papa is?" Before Rebecca could respond, a shadow fell over them both. "Who the hell are you?" The voice was deep, cultured, and carried the kind of authority that made people instinctively obey. Rebecca looked up and found herself staring at the boy's father, who now stood less than 3 feet away. Up close, he was even more imposing than she'd realized. 6'3" easily, with broad shoulders that strained against his perfectly tailored suit jacket. His face was all sharp angles and hard edges, a straight nose, a strong jaw covered in dark stubble, high cheekbones that suggested Mediterranean heritage. but it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Dark brown, almost black, they studied her with an intensity that made her feel like an insect under a microscope. This was a dangerous man. Every instinct Rebecca possessed screamed that warning. But Dante's small hand had found hers, gripping it with desperate trust, and she couldn't walk away. "I'm Rebecca," she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I saw your son crying and I wanted to make sure he was okay. And you just happen to know sign language?" The man's eyes narrowed. Behind him, the 3 security guards had moved closer, their hands conspicuously near their jacket openings. "I learned it from my daughter," Rebecca said, nodding toward Maya, who was watching from the swings with wide eyes. "She's deaf." The man's gaze flicked to Maya, then back to Rebecca. She watched something shift in his expression, though she couldn't read what. His jaw was still tight, but the suspicion in his eyes had been joined by something else. Curiosity, maybe, or hope. Dante tugged on his father's sleeve and began signing rapidly. Rebecca watched the man struggle to follow his son's hands, catching maybe 1 word in 5, his frustration evident. "What is he saying?" the man asked quietly, and Rebecca heard the vulnerability beneath the command. "He's asking if I can stay," Rebecca translated. "He says I'm the first person who's ever really talked to him, that I can hear him when everyone else is deaf." The irony of the words wasn't lost on Rebecca. In Dante's world, where he was the only one who signed, everyone else was deaf to him. The man was quiet for a long moment, studying Rebecca's face as if trying to determine whether she was a threat or a miracle. Finally, he spoke. "My name is Dominic Salvatore," he said, and Rebecca felt her blood turn to ice. She knew that name. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. Dominic Salvatore controlled the north side of the city, ran operations that spanned from legitimate business to things whispered about in dark corners. He was wealth and power and danger personified. People who crossed the Salvatore family tended to disappear, and Rebecca had just voluntarily approached his son. Dominic must have seen the recognition in her eyes because his mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I see you've heard of me. I should go," Rebecca said, starting to stand, but Dante's grip on her hand tightened. The boy was signing frantically, pleading, "Please don't leave. Please. You're the only one who understands me. Please." Rebecca looked down at Dante's desperate face, then up at Dominic's unreadable expression, then over at Maya, who was still watching from the swings. Every rational thought in her head screamed at her to grab her daughter and run, to get as far away from Dominic Salvatore and his world as possible. But then she remembered the isolation in Dante's eyes. The bone-deep loneliness of a child who lived, surrounded by people but existed in complete silence. She thought about how Maya would feel if no one could understand her, if Rebecca wasn't there to translate her world into something others could comprehend. "Your son asked me to stay," Rebecca said quietly, meeting Dominic's intense gaze. "And I don't walk away from children who need someone to hear them." For the first time since he'd approached, Dominic's expression shifted into something almost like respect. "No," he said slowly. "I don't think you do." He pulled out his phone and typed something quickly, then pocketed it again. "My men tell me you're not a threat. No criminal record, no concerning associates, just a single mother working 2 jobs to support your deaf daughter." Rebecca's stomach dropped. "You had me investigated? In the last 5 minutes?" "In the last 90 seconds, Dominic corrected. "When you approached my son, I don't take chances with Dante's safety. The casual display of power should have terrified her." Instead, Rebecca felt an odd surge of understanding. This was a man who lived in a world where everyone was a potential threat, where trusting the wrong person could get you killed. Of course he'd investigated her. In his position, she might have done the same. "Then you know I'm nobody," Rebecca said. "Just a waitress trying to make rent." "Nobody who speaks my son's language," Dominic said, and now his voice carried a weight that made Rebecca shiver. "Nobody who made him smile for the first time in 6 months. Nobody who he's currently refusing to let go of." Rebecca looked down and realized Dante was indeed still gripping her hand, his other hand signing to his father with increasing urgency. "What's he saying now?" Dominic asked, and Rebecca heard the frustration beneath the question, the helplessness of a father who couldn't fully communicate with his own child. Rebecca watched Dante's hands, her throat tightening. "He says he wants me to teach you to sign better, that he has so many things he wants to tell you but you only understand the simple words. He says..." She paused, emotion choking her voice. He says he loves you and he's sorry he can't talk like other kids, but he wants you to know he's trying. Dominic's face went absolutely still. For a moment, he looked like a statue, frozen in time. Then Rebecca saw his jaw clench, saw him blink rapidly, saw him swallow hard. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than before. "Tell him," Dominic said slowly. "Tell him I love him more than anything in this world. Tell him he has nothing to be sorry for. And tell him that if you're willing, I'd like you to teach us both." "What?" Rebecca's eyes snapped to his face. Dominic crouched down beside Dante, placing a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "My boy needs someone who can help him communicate, really communicate. Not just basic signs, but everything he has bottled up inside." He looked up at Rebecca. "And I need someone who can teach me to be the father he deserves. Someone who can bridge the gap between us." "Mr. Salvatore, I'm not qualified to." "You're more qualified than anyone I've found in 7 years," Dominic interrupted. "I've hired specialists, therapists, teachers, the best money can buy. None of them could reach him the way you just did in 5 minutes." His dark eyes held hers. "Name your price," Rebecca's mind reeled. This couldn't be happening. Dominic Salvatore wasn't actually offering her a job she couldn't accept. Getting involved with the Salvatore family was suicide. Everyone knew that. But then Dante signed to her again. "Please stay. Please teach us. I want to talk to my papa like you talk to your daughter." And Rebecca thought about the eviction notice in her purse, about the medical bills and the empty refrigerator, and the terror of not knowing where she and Maya would sleep next week. She thought about all the legitimate jobs she'd applied for and been rejected from, all the doors that had been slammed in her face. Here was Dominic Salvatore, one of the most dangerous men in Chicago, offering her a way out, offering her money to do something she was actually good at, something that would help a lonely little boy who reminded her so much of Maya. "I need to pay 2 months' rent by Friday," Rebecca heard herself say. $3,000, and I need enough to cover my daughter's medical bills, therapy sessions, and special education costs. And I need the promise that Maya and I won't be put in danger because of this arrangement. One of Dominic's security guards shifted forward, but Dominic waved him back. $3,000 by Friday is nothing. I'll have it delivered to your apartment by tonight." He stood, towering over her again. "Medical bills and education costs, I'll cover in full. As for safety," his voice went cold. "Anyone who threatens you or your daughter answers to me. You'll have protection whether you see it or not." "Why?" Rebecca whispered. "Why would you do all this?" Dominic looked down at his son, and for just a moment, the dangerous crime lord disappeared and all Rebecca saw was a father desperate to connect with his child. "Because in 7 years, you're the first person who made my son feel heard," Dominic said quietly. "And I'd burn down the entire city to keep him from feeling alone." The words hung in the air between them, a vow and a warning all at once. Rebecca understood with crystal clarity that she was being offered an impossible choice. Accept Dominic's help and enter a world of wealth and danger she couldn't begin to understand. Or refuse and go back to her crumbling life, leaving behind a little boy who desperately needed someone to hear him. Maya's voice cut through her thoughts. "Mama, who's that?" Rebecca turned to see her daughter approaching, her small face curious but not afraid. Maya stopped beside Rebecca and looked up at Dominic with the open interest of a child who didn't yet understand danger. "Hello?" Maya signed to Dominic. "I'm Maya. That's my mama. She's the best." Dominic's expression softened in a way that transformed his entire face. He looked at Rebecca. "What did she say?" Before Rebecca could translate, Dante had scrambled off his swing and was now standing in front of Maya, signing excitedly. "Hi, I'm Dante. You can sign too? Really?" Maya's face lit up like Christmas morning. You sign? Mama, he signs?" Rebecca watched as the two children began chattering to each other with their hands, Maya's animated storytelling meeting Dante's eager questions. They were speaking the same language, literally and figuratively. Two children who lived in a world that often ignored them, suddenly finding a peer who understood. Dominic moved to stand beside Rebecca, both of them watching their children. "They're alike," he said quietly, both of them living in silence while the world shouts around them. "Maya isn't silent," Rebecca said softly. "She has a voice. The world just doesn't always listen." "Like Dante," Dominic agreed. His dark eyes found hers. "But you listen. To both of them." "Someone has to." "Yes, Dominic said. Someone does. He pulled a business card from his pocket and held it out to her. Think about my offer. You don't have to decide right now. The money for your rent will be in your mailbox tonight regardless. Take a few days, talk to your daughter, weigh your options. Rebecca took the card. With trembling fingers. It was heavy stock, embossed with a phone number and nothing else. No name, no address. She recognized it for what it was. A direct line to one of Chicago's most powerful men. And if I say no, then you say no, Dominic said simply. The money is yours either way. Consider it payment for the gift you gave my son today. 5 minutes of feeling normal. He paused. But I hope you'll say yes. For Dante's sake. And, his voice dropped lower, for yours. Before Rebecca could respond, Dante and Maya ran up to them, both children talking excitedly with their hands. Mama, can Dante come play with us? Maya signed. He says he never plays with other kids. That's so sad. Dante was signing to his father with equal enthusiasm. Papa, Maya knows all the same signs I do. She goes to a special school. Can I go there too, please? Dominic looked at Rebecca, and for the first time, she saw him not as a dangerous criminal, but as a father completely out of his depth. What do we do? He asked her quietly, and there was something almost boyish in the question, as if he were confessing that he had no idea how to navigate this moment. Rebecca made a decision that would change everything. Let them play, she said. For an hour. We'll stay here, watch them, and they can just be kids for a little while. Relief flooded Dominic's face. Thank you. As Maya and Dante raced back to the playground equipment, Rebecca and Dominic settled onto a bench nearby. The security guards maintained their perimeter, but from a distance. For a moment, Rebecca let herself imagine this was normal, just two single parents watching their kids play on a Wednesday afternoon. But the weight of Dominic's presence beside her, the expensive fabric of his suit, the way other park-goers gave them a wide berth, all reminded her that nothing about this was normal. Tell me about Maya, Dominic said after a moment. How did you learn to communicate with her? And somehow, Rebecca found herself talking. About the terrifying moment when the doctors confirmed Maya's diagnosis. About David walking out. About teaching herself ASL through YouTube videos and library books because she couldn't afford proper classes. About the joy of the first time Maya signed I love you with perfect clarity. Dominic listened with an attention that was almost unnerving in its intensity. He asked questions that showed he was genuinely trying to understand. And when Rebecca finished, he was quiet for a long moment. I failed Dante, he said finally. When his mother died 2 years ago, Dante stopped speaking. The doctors said it was selective mutism brought on by trauma. They said he'd speak again when he was ready. Dominic's jaw clenched, but he never did. And I realized too late that he'd found a different way to talk. One I was too ignorant to understand properly. You learned some signs, Rebecca pointed out. That's more than most parents do. Basic survival signs, Dominic said, bitterly. Eat, sleep, bathroom. Yes, no. I can have a conversation with my son about his bodily functions, but I can't ask him about his dreams. Can't tell him stories. Can't explain why his mother isn't coming back. He looked at her. Do you know what that's like? To love someone desperately and not be able to tell them properly? Rebecca thought about the bills in her purse. About lying awake at night wondering if she was failing Maya. Yes, she whispered. I do. Then you understand why I need you. Before Rebecca could respond, a black sedan pulled into the parking lot, moving fast. Too fast. Dominic was on his feet instantly, his hand moving inside his jacket. The 3 security guards converged on their position, forming a protective barrier between Dominic and the approaching vehicle. Stay with the children, Dominic commanded Rebecca, his voice gone cold and hard. Get them behind the bench. Now. Rebecca's heart hammered as she ran to where Maya and Dante were playing on the slides. Come here, babies. She signed urgently to both children. Right now. Something in her face must have communicated the danger, because both children obeyed immediately. Rebecca positioned them behind the bench, her body between them and whatever threat was approaching. Through the gaps in the security guards, she could see the sedan had stopped and a man was climbing out. He was older than Dominic, maybe 50, with silver hair and a face like carved granite. He wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than Rebecca's car, and he moved with the confidence of someone used to power. Dominic, the man called out. Didn't expect to see you slumming in public parks. Antonio, Dominic replied, and Rebecca heard the ice in his voice. This is neutral territory. You have no business here. Actually, Antonio said, moving closer. His eyes swept the scene, landing briefly on Rebecca and the children before returning to Dominic. I have every business being anywhere in Chicago. You don't own this city, nephew. Nephew. Rebecca felt her blood run cold. She didn't know much about organized crime, but she knew enough to recognize a family dispute when she heard one. I own what I've earned, Dominic said, and I've earned the right to spend an afternoon with my son without your interference. Antonio's smile was sharp as a knife. Of course. Family time is important. His gaze drifted back to Rebecca and the children. I see Dante's made a friend. How nice. And who's the woman? No one who concerns you. Everything that happens in this city concerns me, Antonio countered. Especially when it involves my great-nephew spending time with strangers. He took a step toward the bench, and instantly Dominic's men moved to block him. Rebecca's arms tightened around both children. Dante was trembling against her side, his hands signing frantically. I don't like Uncle Antonio. He's mean. He scares me. Maya looked up at Rebecca with wide, frightened eyes. Mama? What's happening? It's okay, babies, Rebecca signed, trying to project calm she didn't feel. Everything's okay. But it wasn't okay. Even Rebecca could feel the tension crackling in the air, could see the way Dominic and Antonio were facing off like two predators determining territory. This was dangerous. This was the world she'd be entering if she accepted Dominic's offer. Leave, Antonio, Dominic said quietly, before this becomes something neither of us wants. Antonio laughed. Threatening me? In public? Dominic, you're losing your touch. Time was, you knew better than to show weakness. I'm not showing weakness. I'm spending time with my son. There's a difference. Is there? Antonio's eyes gleamed. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're distracted, attached. That's always been your problem, nephew. You care too much about the wrong things. Your father never would have made that mistake. Rebecca watched Dominic's face go absolutely still, and she realized she was seeing the man his enemies feared. There was no warmth in his expression now, no humanity, just cold, calculated danger. My father is dead, Dominic said, his voice soft and deadly. And you're walking a very thin line, Uncle. For a moment, Rebecca thought violence would erupt right there in the playground. She could see it in the way both men held themselves, in the way the security guards had positioned themselves for a fight. Her arms tightened protectively around Maya and Dante. Then Antonio smiled and stepped back, hands raised in mock surrender. Peace, nephew. I'm not here to fight. Just wanted to remind you that the family meeting is next week. Your attendance isn't optional. I'll be there. Good. Antonio's gaze drifted once more to Rebecca, and she felt stripped bare under his assessment. And Dominic? Be careful with your new attachments. It would be a shame if something happened to them. The threat hung in the air, clear and unmistakable. Then, Antonio turned and walked back to his sedan, climbing in without another word. The car pulled away, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. Dominic stood frozen for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. When he finally moved, it was to turn toward Rebecca and the children, his face still carved from stone. Are you hurt? He asked, and his voice had gone rough. Any of you? Both children shook their heads. Rebecca found her voice. We're okay. Just scared. Dominic closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, some of the humanity had returned. He walked over and knelt in front of Dante, signing slowly. I'm sorry you had to see that. Uncle Antonio is just trying to upset me. You're safe. Dante's hands moved in response. I don't want him near my friend. He's mean. I know, buddy. I'll keep all of you safe. I promise. Rebecca watched this exchange and felt something shift inside her. This was the reality of Dominic's world. Threats in public parks. Family members who played power games with children as leverage. A life where even a simple afternoon at the playground could turn dangerous in seconds. She should walk away. Should take Maya and run as far and as fast as possible. Should never look back. But then Dante turned to her, his small face still pale with fear, and signed, You're not going to leave because of Uncle Antonio, are you? Please don't leave. You're the only one who really understands me. And Rebecca realized with startling clarity that she'd already made her choice. The moment she'd approached a crying child and spoken in his language, She'd stepped into Dominic Salvatore's orbit. There was no going back now. I'm not leaving. She signed to Dante, and felt the words settle into her bones like a vow. I promise. Dominic's dark eyes found hers, and in them, she saw relief, gratitude, and something else. Something that made her pulse quicken. Thank you, he said quietly. Rebecca nodded, knowing she'd just committed herself to something far bigger and more dangerous than she could possibly understand. But as she watched Dante's face light up with hope, as she felt Maya's small hand slip into hers with perfect trust, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Sometimes the right choice wasn't the safe one. Sometimes you had to step into the fire to save the people who needed you. Rebecca just hoped she wouldn't get burned. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of amber and rose, when Dominic finally suggested they leave the park. Maya and Dante had spent the past hour playing together with the pure, uncomplicated joy of children who'd found a kindred spirit. But Antonio's visit had cast a shadow over everything, and Rebecca could see the tension in every line of Dominic's body. Let me drive you home, Dominic said as Rebecca gathered Maya's things. It wasn't really a request. That's not necessary, Rebecca started, but Dominic cut her off with a look. It is necessary. Antonio knows you exist now. That makes you a target. His voice dropped lower. I won't leave you unprotected. Rebecca wanted to argue, but the memory of Antonio's cold assessment, his barely veiled threat, made her reconsider. Okay, she said quietly. The drive to Rebecca's apartment in Dominic's SUV was like traveling between two different planets. They started in the affluent neighborhoods near the park, passed through the business district, where skyscrapers gleamed in the fading light, and gradually descended into the parts of Chicago that tourists never saw. Buildings with boarded windows, graffiti-covered walls, people huddled in doorways with nowhere else to go. Rebecca felt Dominic's silence grow heavier with each block, could feel him taking in the reality of her life. When they finally pulled up in front of her building, a 3-story walk-up with peeling paint and a broken security door, the contrast to his world couldn't have been more stark. This is it, Rebecca said, trying to keep the defensiveness out of her voice. It's not much, but it's home. Dominic was quiet, studying the building with an expression she couldn't read. Finally, he turned to look at her. How much is your rent? $1,500 a month. For how many rooms? 1 bedroom. Maya and I share. Rebecca lifted her chin. Like I said, it's not much, but we make it work. There's a broken window on the 2nd floor, Dominic observed. Covered with cardboard, bars on the ground-level windows, but they're rusted through. The lock on the front door is broken. His dark eyes found hers. This isn't safe, Rebecca. It's what I can afford. Not anymore. Dominic pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. My people will deliver the $3,000 tonight like I promised, but I'm also going to set you up in a better place. Somewhere secure. I don't need charity. It's not charity, Dominic interrupted firmly. It's common sense. If you're going to be teaching Dante, you'll be spending significant time with my family. That makes you and Maya visible. This building, he gestured at the dilapidated structure, has no security, no protection. Anyone could walk in. No one bothers us here, Rebecca argued, but even as she said it, she thought about the men who sometimes loitered in the hallway. The domestic disputes she heard through thin walls. The way she checked their door locks every night. Not yet, Dominic said. But after today, after Antonio saw you with Dante, that changes things. His voice gentled slightly. Rebecca, I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to keep you safe. There's a difference. In the back seat, Maya and Dante were playing a hand game, their giggles filling the car with innocent joy. Rebecca watched them and felt her resistance crumbling. This wasn't just about her pride anymore. It was about Maya's safety, too. Where? She asked quietly. I have a property in Lincoln Park. Townhome, 3 bedrooms, full security system, guards on rotation. Dominic watched her face. You'd have your own space. Independence. But you'd be protected. I can't afford. The rent is included in your salary. Dominic's tone left no room for argument. Consider it part of the compensation package. What salary? We haven't even discussed terms yet. Dominic's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. Then let's discuss them. Come to dinner at my house tomorrow night. You and Maya. We'll talk properly about what this arrangement looks like. Dante would love to have Maya over, and you can see where you'd be working. Rebecca knew she should be cautious, should ask for time to think. But the truth was, she'd already made her decision in the park. Everything else was just details. Okay, she said. Dinner tomorrow. But Dominic. She met his eyes. I need to understand what I'm getting into. Your uncle made it very clear that being associated with you is dangerous. It is, Dominic agreed, and she appreciated that he didn't try to sugarcoat it. My world is complicated. There are people who would hurt you to get to me. But there are also benefits. Protection. Resources. The ability to give Maya everything she needs. I don't want to be bought. You're not being bought, Dominic said. You're being employed. There's a difference. You have a skill set my son desperately needs. I'm willing to pay well for that skill. Everything else, the security, the housing, that's about keeping my investment safe. Your investment, Rebecca repeated flatly. Dominic had the grace to look slightly chagrined. That came out wrong. What I mean is, I know what you meant, Rebecca interrupted. You're a businessman. You think in terms of assets and liabilities. But Dominic, she turned to face him fully, your son isn't an investment. He's a little boy who's been lonely and isolated for years. If I do this, if I accept your offer, it won't be for the money. It'll be for him. Something shifted in Dominic's expression. The hard edges softened, and for just a moment, Rebecca saw past the dangerous crime lord to the vulnerable father underneath. I know, he said quietly. That's why I want you. Anyone can be bought, Rebecca. But you can't. You'll do this because you care. Because you see Dante as a person, not as the heir to a criminal empire. That's rarer than you know. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken things hanging between them. Finally, Rebecca opened her door. Tomorrow night, she said. What time? 6. I'll send a car for you. I can take the bus, Rebecca. Dominic's voice carried gentle exasperation. Let me send a car, please. I'll rest easier knowing you arrived safely. Rebecca wanted to argue, but she was too tired. Fine. 6 o'clock. She climbed out and went to get Maya from the back seat. As she lifted her daughter, Dante's hands moved frantically. Will I see Maya tomorrow? He signed. Please say yes. Yes, Rebecca signed back. We're coming to your house for dinner. Dante's face lit up with such pure joy that Rebecca felt her chest tighten. This child needed her. Needed someone who could bridge the gap between his silent world and everyone else's. How could she walk away from that? As Rebecca carried a sleepy Maya toward their building, she heard Dominic's window roll down. Rebecca, he called. She turned back. Thank you. For today. For everything. Rebecca nodded and continued inside, very aware of the SUV idling at the curb until she'd made it through the broken security door. Only then did she hear it pull away. Their apartment was exactly as they'd left it that morning. Small, cramped, with peeling wallpaper and a kitchen sink that dripped no matter how many times she tried to fix it. But it was theirs. Safe and familiar. Rebecca settled Maya on their shared bed and helped her change into pajamas. Did you have fun today, baby? She signed. So much fun. Maya's hands moved excitedly. Dante is nice. He knows all the same signs I do. Can we play with him again? We're going to his house tomorrow, Rebecca signed. For dinner. Maya's eyes went wide. Really? His house? Is it big? I think so, yes. Mama. Maya's hands moved slower now, more seriously. Is Dante's papa dangerous? Some of the people at the park looked scared of him. Rebecca's heart clenched. She'd hoped Maya hadn't noticed. He's powerful, she signed carefully. And powerful people sometimes scare others. But I don't think he'll hurt us. He loves Dante, Maya signed. I could tell. He looks at him the same way you look at me. Out of the mouths of babes, Rebecca thought. Yes, sweetheart. He loves Dante very much. After Maya fell asleep, Rebecca sat at their tiny kitchen table and stared at the stack of bills she'd been avoiding all day. Past due. Final notice. Disconnection warning. The words blurred together until she couldn't read them anymore. Then she thought about Dominic's promise. $3,000 tonight. A secure apartment. A salary that would let her actually breathe for the first time in 2 years. All she had to do was teach a lonely little boy to communicate with his father, help bridge a gap that had left them both isolated and hurting. It seemed too good to be true. And in Rebecca's experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. But as she looked at Maya sleeping peacefully in their shared bed, at the threadbare blanket and the toys they'd gotten from the free bin at church, Rebecca knew she didn't have the luxury of caution anymore. Sometimes you had to take the risk. Sometimes you had to trust that not everyone with power was cruel. At 10:30 that night, there was a knock on their apartment door. Rebecca looked through the peephole and saw one of Dominic's security guards, the one who'd been introduced as Marco. He was holding a plain manila envelope. She opened the door but kept the chain on. "Yes? Mr. Salvatore asked me to deliver this," Marco said, holding up the envelope, "and to make sure you received it safely." Rebecca unhooked the chain and took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside, she found $3,100 bills, crisp and new. $3,000, exactly as promised. "There's also this," Marco said, handing her a second envelope. "Information about the property in Lincoln Park. Keys will be provided tomorrow if you decide to accept." Rebecca stared at the money in her hands. This was real. This was actually happening. "Tell Mr. Salvatore thank you," she said quietly. Marco nodded. "I'll be outside for the rest of the night, making sure everything stays quiet." "That's not necessary." "It is," Marco said, echoing his boss's words from earlier. "Orders from Mr. Salvatore. You're under his protection now, Miss Torres. That means 24/7 security until he's satisfied you're safe." Before Rebecca could protest, Marco had taken up a clasped position across the hall, settling in like he planned to stay there all night. She realized with a mixture of gratitude and alarm that he probably would. Rebecca closed and locked her door, then sat down heavily on their one piece of furniture. The money felt heavy in her hands, real and terrifying and full of possibilities. She'd crossed a line today, stepped into Dominic Salvatore's world with both feet, and there was no going back now. The best she could do was move forward and hope that she hadn't just made the biggest mistake of her life. Outside her window, Chicago glittered in the darkness, full of secrets and danger and opportunities. Somewhere out there, Dominic Salvatore was probably tucking his son into bed, signing goodnight in his clumsy but earnest way. Somewhere out there, Antonio and whoever else wanted to hurt Dominic were probably making plans. And here, in her tiny apartment with peeling wallpaper and a leaking sink, Rebecca Torres tried to sleep and failed. Because she kept thinking about Dante's desperate need to be understood, about Dominic's vulnerability when he'd admitted he couldn't communicate with his own son, about the way her entire life had changed in the span of a single afternoon. She'd gone to the park to escape her problems for an hour. Instead, she'd stumbled into something far bigger than herself. A family that needed healing, a man who was dangerous and powerful and surprisingly human, a little boy who just wanted someone to hear him. Tomorrow she'd go to Dominic's house. She'd see his world up close, and she'd make the final decision about whether to fully commit to this impossible, terrifying, necessary thing. But tonight, Rebecca let herself feel the weight of $3,000 in her hands. The rent she could pay, the food she could buy, the breathing room she'd been desperate for. And she admitted to herself that maybe, just maybe, she'd already decided, the moment Dante's small hand had gripped hers in the park. The moment she'd seen a child trapped in isolation and known she could help. The moment she'd looked into Dominic Salvatore's dark eyes and seen not a monster, but a father who loved his son with a desperation that matched her own love for Maya. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, new questions about what she was getting herself into. But tonight, Rebecca Torres allowed herself a moment of hope. That maybe, just maybe, she'd found a way to save not just herself and Maya, but a little boy who desperately needed someone to understand him. And maybe, in the process, she'd save his father too. The black sedan that arrived at precisely 5:45 the next evening was so pristine it looked like it had rolled off the showroom floor that morning. Rebecca watched through her window as Marco emerged from the driver's seat, his dark suit crisp despite the muggy Chicago heat. This was her life now, apparently. Men in expensive suits arriving in luxury cars to escort her to dinner, with a crime lord. "Mama, is that our ride?" Maya signed excitedly, pressing her nose against the glass. She'd been vibrating with anticipation all day, asking every 10 minutes when they'd leave for Dante's house. "Yes, baby. Go get your shoes." Rebecca checked her reflection one more time in the bathroom mirror and tried not to wince. She'd done the best she could with her limited wardrobe, settling on a simple navy dress she usually reserved for job interviews, and her one pair of heels that didn't have scuffed toes. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she'd applied minimal makeup with a shaking hand. She looked like exactly what she was. A working-class woman trying to dress up for dinner with people who probably spent more on a single meal than she made in a month. The drive to Dominic's estate took 30 minutes, carrying them from Rebecca's crumbling neighborhood through increasingly affluent areas, until they reached the kind of streets where homes hid behind high walls and iron gates. Marco turned down a tree-lined drive, and Rebecca felt her breath catch as the Salvatore mansion came into view. It wasn't just a house, it was a statement. 3 stories of limestone and glass, with columns that belonged on a government building and gardens that looked like they required a full-time staff. Lights blazed from every window, making the entire structure glow against the darkening sky like something from a fairy tale. "Wow," Maya signed, her small face pressed against the window. "Dante lives here? It's like a castle." Rebecca's stomach churned with nerves as Marco pulled up to the front entrance. Before she could reach for the door handle, it was opened by another suited man who offered his hand to help her out. Maya scrambled out after her mother, her eyes huge as she took in the mansion's grandeur. The front door opened before they reached it, and Dante came racing out. His face lit up with such pure joy that Rebecca felt some of her nervousness dissolve. The boy launched himself at Maya, his hands moving frantically. "You came. You really came. I've been waiting all day. Your house is so big." Maya signed back, spinning in a circle to take it all in. "Can we explore, please?" Dominic appeared in the doorway, and Rebecca's breath caught for an entirely different reason. Gone was the intimidating businessman in the charcoal suit. Tonight, he wore dark jeans and a black button-down with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing muscled forearms. His hair was slightly damp, as if he'd just showered, and the evening light caught the silver threading through the dark strands at his temples. He looked younger, more relaxed, and somehow even more dangerous for it. "Rebecca," Dominic said, his voice carrying that warm timbre that made her shiver. "Welcome. Please, come in." The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than the exterior. Marble floors stretched in every direction, reflecting light from crystal chandeliers. Oil paintings in heavy gold frames lined the walls, a mixture of classical art and what looked like family portraits. A sweeping staircase dominated the entrance hall, its banister polished to a mirror shine. But what struck Rebecca most was how cold it all felt. Beautiful, yes. Expensive, absolutely. But sterile. Like a museum rather than a home where a child lived. "Can I show Maya my room?" Dante signed to his father. "Please?" Dominic glanced at Rebecca, who nodded. "Stay upstairs." He signed to Dante with his limited vocabulary. No running. The 2 children raced toward the staircase, their excited signing and laughter echoing through the vast space. Rebecca watched them go with a mixture of fondness and trepidation. She was alone now with Dominic Salvatore in his domain. "Your home is beautiful," she said, because she had to say something to break the tension. "It's a house," Dominic corrected. "Not really a home. Not since Dante's mother died." He gestured toward a hallway. "Come, we'll talk in my study before dinner." Rebecca followed him through the mansion, trying not to gawk at the casual wealth on display. They passed a formal living room that looked like it had never been used, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and what appeared to be a home theater. Everything was perfect. Nothing felt lived in. Dominic's study was different. This room bore signs of actual use. Papers stacked on the massive desk, a half-empty glass of whiskey, a framed photograph of a young woman holding a newborn that could only be Dante's mother. The leather furniture looked comfortable rather than decorative, and the walls held certificates and awards mixed with more family photos. "Sit," Dominic said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "Can I get you something to drink? Wine? Water?" "Water's fine," Rebecca said, settling into the chair and trying not to look as nervous as she felt. Dominic poured water from a crystal decanter and handed it to her before taking his own seat. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the weight of yesterday's events hanging between them. "I had my lawyers draw up a contract," Dominic said finally, pulling a thick document from his desk drawer. "I want everything official, clear, so there's no misunderstanding about expectations." Rebecca took the contract with trembling hands and began reading. The terms were laid out in precise legal language, but the core was simple enough. She would serve as Dante's personal tutor and communication specialist, working 5 days a week for 4 hours each day. Her responsibilities included teaching Dante advanced sign language, helping him process his trauma and grief, and instructing Dominic in sign language so he could communicate more effectively with his son. The salary made her eyes water. $15,000 a month. This is too much, Rebecca whispered. For 20 hours a week It's what you're worth, Dominic interrupted. And it's not just about the hours, Rebecca. You're taking on responsibility for my son's emotional well-being. You're entering a world that comes with inherent dangers. You're putting yourself and Maya at risk by association with my family. His dark eyes held hers. $15,000 a month is the bare minimum for what I'm asking of you. Rebecca kept reading. The contract included comprehensive health insurance for both her and Maya, covering everything from routine checkups to specialist care. There was a clause about the Lincoln Park townhouse, which would be provided rent-free as part of her compensation. Security would be provided whenever she or Maya left the property. All of Maya's educational needs would be covered, including enrollment in the premier deaf education program in Chicago. It was everything she'd ever dreamed of, and more. Which is exactly why alarm bells were ringing in her head. What's the catch? Rebecca asked bluntly. This is too generous. What aren't you telling me? Dominic leaned back in his chair, studying her with that unnerving intensity. The catch is that once you sign this, you're part of my world. Really part of it. That means there are people who will see you as leverage against me. It means you'll need to be careful about who you talk to, where you go, what you say. It means accepting security even when you don't want it. Sounds like a prison sentence. Or protection, Dominic countered. Depending on your perspective. He stood and moved to the window, looking out at his manicured grounds. I won't lie to you, Rebecca. This life comes with complications, but it also comes with resources. The ability to give Maya every opportunity, the chance to help a child who desperately needs you. He turned back to face her. The question is whether the benefits outweigh the costs. Rebecca thought about her crumbling apartment, about the bills that never stopped coming, about the constant fear of not having enough, of failing Maya, of one emergency away from complete disaster. She thought about Dante's desperate loneliness and Dominic's clumsy attempts to communicate with his own son. Then she thought about Antonio's cold eyes and veiled threats, about the casual violence in Dominic's world, about the danger she'd be putting Maya in. I need a guarantee, Rebecca said finally. If I do this, if I sign this contract, I need your word that you'll protect Maya, not just me, her. She's innocent in all of this. She deserves to be safe. Something fierce flashed in Dominic's expression. On my life, he said, and the words carried the weight of a sacred vow. No harm will come to your daughter while I draw breath. Anyone who threatens her will answer to me personally. The conviction in his voice made Rebecca believe him. This was a man who understood the love of a parent for a child, who would burn the world to keep his son safe, and he was extending that same protection to Maya. Okay, Rebecca said, picking up the pen. Dominic had placed beside the contract. Where do I sign? 20 minutes later, after Rebecca had signed her name in triplicate and Dominic had countersigned, they were interrupted by a knock on the study door. A woman in her 60s entered, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, wearing a simple black dress that somehow managed to look both professional and warm. Mr. Salvatore, dinner is ready, she said in a voice touched with an Italian accent. And the children are getting restless. Thank you, Maria, Dominic said. He turned to Rebecca. This is Maria Castellano. She runs the household. Maria, this is Rebecca Torres. She'll be working with Dante starting next week. Maria's sharp eyes assessed Rebecca with the kind of thorough evaluation that probably missed nothing. But when she smiled, it seemed genuine. Welcome, Miss Torres. It's good to see someone who can make young Dante smile. That boy needs more joy in his life. Please, call me Rebecca. Then you must. Call me Maria. The older woman's expression softened. I've known Dante since he was born. Watched him retreat further into himself after his mother passed. These last 2 days since he met your daughter, he's been different. Lighter. So thank you for that. Rebecca felt a lump form in her throat. He's a special boy. Any adult who took the time to learn his language would see that. Yes, Maria agreed, her eyes flicking briefly to Dominic. One would think. There was a gentle rebuke in those words, and Rebecca watched Dominic's jaw tighten slightly. Clearly, Maria wasn't afraid to speak her mind, even to her powerful employer. They found Maya and Dante in the formal dining room, a space so grand it could have hosted a state dinner. The table could easily seat 20, but tonight only 4 places had been set at one end, making the massive room feel slightly less intimidating. The children were already seated, signing animatedly to each other about something that had them both giggling. "What's so funny?" Dominic asked as he held out Rebecca's chair. Dante's hands moved quickly. "Maya told me about the time she tried to teach her fish to sign. She kept putting her hands in the tank and signing, 'Hello,' but the fish just swam away." Dominic's mouth twitched, and Rebecca was struck by how the expression transformed his face. When he wasn't being the intimidating crime lord, he was actually handsome in a rough, dangerous way that made her pulse skip. "That does sound funny." Dominic signed back, his movement still clumsy but improving. He'd clearly been practicing. Dinner was served by silent staff who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. The food was restaurant quality: tender filet mignon, roasted vegetables that actually had flavor, and a pasta dish that made Rebecca want to weep. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten something that wasn't ramen or diner leftovers. Throughout the meal, Rebecca watched Dominic interact with his son. The love was evident in every glance, every gesture, but so was the frustration. When Dante tried to tell a story about something that happened at his private school, Dominic could only catch fragments. Rebecca found herself translating without being asked, bridging the gap between father and son. "He says his teacher asked him to draw a picture of his family," Rebecca explained as Dante's hands moved. "He drew you and him, but he also drew his mother as an angel watching over you both. The teacher told him it was beautiful and put it up on the wall." Dominic's expression went very still. "Can I see the picture?" Dante nodded eagerly and ran from the room, returning moments later with a rolled-up piece of construction paper. He handed it to his father with careful hands. Rebecca watched Dominic unroll the drawing, and something in her chest cracked at the emotion that crossed his face. The picture was simple, done in crayon with a child's earnest lack of skill. But the meaning was clear. 2 stick figures holding hands, one tall and one small, and above them, a woman with wings and a halo, her smile bright even in crayon. "It's beautiful," Dominic said, his voice rough. He attempted to sign the words, and Dante's face lit up with joy at being understood. "Can I keep this?" Dante nodded enthusiastically. "I made it for you, so you remember Mama is still watching us." "I could never forget," Dominic said, and Rebecca had to look away from the naked grief on his face. After dinner, the children begged to watch a movie together. Dominic led them to the home theater, a room with actual theater seating and a screen that took up an entire wall. While the children settled in with popcorn and an animated film, Dominic gestured for Rebecca to follow him back out to the hallway. "Walk with me," he said. "There are things we need to discuss." They strolled through the mansion's halls, and Rebecca noticed details she'd missed before. The alarm panel by every door, the cameras positioned at strategic points, the way windows were all reinforced glass. This house wasn't just a home, it was a fortress. "Starting Monday, you and Maya will move into the Lincoln Park property," Dominic said. "I've already had it furnished with everything you'll need, including a bedroom designed specifically for Maya. Toys, books, everything." "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Dominic corrected. "You're working for me now." "That means you're under my protection. I take care of what's mine." The possessive phrasing should have bothered Rebecca. Instead, it sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. "What about my things? At the apartment? A moving crew will handle everything this weekend. You won't have to lift a finger." Rebecca stopped walking and turned to face him. "Dominic, this is all happening very fast. Yesterday I was a waitress barely making rent. Today I'm signing contracts and moving into a luxury townhouse. Tomorrow I'm supposed to just integrate into your life like this is normal." "Nothing about this is normal," Dominic agreed. He moved closer, and Rebecca found herself very aware of his height, his presence, the faint scent of expensive cologne mixed with something darker. "But nothing about our situation is normal either. My son is isolated and lonely. You have the ability to change that. Everything else is just logistics." "It's not just logistics," Rebecca argued. "It's my entire life changing. Maya's entire life changing. We're giving up our independence, our privacy, our safety," Dominic interrupted. "Because that apartment wasn't safe, Rebecca. The neighborhood wasn't safe. The school Maya was attending wasn't meeting her needs. You were drowning, one crisis away from losing everything." His voice gentled. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to give you the resources to thrive. There's a difference. Rebecca wanted to argue, but he wasn't wrong. She had been drowning, working herself to exhaustion just to stay afloat. And for what? An apartment with mold in the bathroom and neighbors who screamed at each other at 3 a.m? I just don't want to lose myself in this, she said quietly. Don't want Maya to forget where we came from. You won't, Dominic said. And I won't let you. He reached out and gently tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're here because of who you are, Rebecca. Because you see my son as a person worth knowing. Because you have compassion and skill and courage. Those qualities don't change just because your zip code does. The touch sent electricity through Rebecca's body. She knew she should step back, maintain professional distance. But Dominic's dark eyes held her captive, and for a moment, she forgot to breathe. Mr. Salvatore. A voice called from down the hall, breaking the moment. One of the security guards approached quickly. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation that requires your attention. Dominic's expression shifted, instantly from gentle to dangerous. What situation? Antonio sent men to the Torres apartment. They're asking questions about Miss Torres and her daughter. The neighbors are talking. Rebecca felt her blood turn to ice. My apartment? Why? Because my uncle wants to know who you are, Dominic said, his voice gone cold. And more importantly, why I'm interested in you. He turned to the guard. Is Marco still on site? Yes, sir. He's maintaining surveillance. Good. Tell him to document everything, but don't engage unless there's a direct threat. I want to know exactly what Antonio's people are after. The guard nodded and disappeared. Dominic turned back to Rebecca, and she saw genuine concern in his expression. This is why you can't go back there, he said quietly. Antonio knows your name now, knows where you live. If he thinks you're important to me, he'll use that information. But I'm not important to you, Rebecca protested. I'm just Dante's teacher. Something flickered across Dominic's face. That makes you very important, he said. My son hasn't connected with anyone the way he has with you and Maya. Antonio will see that. Will understand that hurting you would hurt Dante, which would hurt me. His jaw clenched. I won't let that happen. Rebecca thought about the men at her apartment, asking questions, probably intimidating her neighbors. Mrs. Chen, who'd been so kind. Old Mr. Martinez, who always held the door. They didn't deserve to be dragged into this. What about my neighbors? She asked. The people I know there? They'll be fine, Dominic assured her. Antonio's not interested in them. He's interested in you. He pulled out his phone and typed quickly. I'm moving up the timeline. You and Maya are staying here tonight. The Lincoln Park property isn't ready yet, but I have guest rooms that are secure. Dominic, we can't just... You can and you will, Dominic said firmly. This isn't a request, Rebecca. Antonio knowing where you live changes everything. Until I assess the threat level, you're staying somewhere I can keep you safe. Rebecca wanted to argue, but the memory of Antonio's cold eyes and veiled threats made her reconsider. And truthfully, the thought of going back to that apartment, knowing men had been there asking about her, made her skin crawl. Okay, she said quietly. We'll stay. But just for tonight. We'll see, Dominic said, which wasn't really an agreement at all. They returned to the theater to find both children had fallen asleep, Maya curled against Dante's shoulder, both of them peaceful in the way only children could be. Rebecca felt her heart clench at the sight. They look like siblings, Dominic observed quietly. They act like it too, Rebecca agreed. I've never seen Maya bond with someone so quickly. Same with Dante. Dominic moved closer to the sleeping children. He's always been shy, withdrawn. But with Maya, he's different, more open. They speak the same language, Rebecca said. Literally. That creates a connection most children don't get to experience. Dominic carefully lifted Dante into his arms. The boy stirred but didn't wake, just nestled against his father's chest with complete trust. Rebecca gathered Maya, who mumbled something unintelligible but stayed asleep. I'll show you to the guest rooms, Dominic said quietly. They're connected through a shared bathroom. You and Maya can have some privacy but still be close. He led them upstairs to a wing of the house Rebecca hadn't seen yet. The guest rooms were smaller than the main bedrooms but still larger than her entire apartment. Each had a queen-sized bed with linens that probably cost more than Rebecca's car, attached bathrooms with spa-like fixtures, and enough closet space for a family of 4. Rebecca settled Maya into one bed, carefully removing her shoes and pulling the covers up. Her daughter barely stirred, exhausted from the excitement of the day. In the next room, she could hear Dominic doing the same with Dante, his low voice murmuring something in Italian that sounded like a lullaby. When Rebecca emerged from Maya's room, she found Dominic waiting in the hallway. He'd loosened the top buttons of his shirt, and she caught a glimpse of a tattoo on his chest before forcing her eyes away. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. The contract, the security, letting us stay here tonight. You don't need to thank me," Dominic said. "This is what family does. Takes care of each other. We're not family." "Not yet," Dominic agreed, but there was something in his voice that made Rebecca's pulse quicken. "But Dante thinks of Maya as a sister already, and I think of you as—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Essential." The word hung between them, weighted with meanings Rebecca wasn't ready to examine. She should say goodnight, should go into her room and lock the door and maintain appropriate boundaries between employer and employee. Instead, she heard herself ask, "What happened to Dante's mother, if you don't mind me asking?" Pain flashed across Dominic's face, but he didn't shut down the question. "Car accident. 2 years ago. Drunk driver ran a red light and hit them broadside. Isabel died on impact. Dante survived with minor injuries." His voice went rough. He hasn't spoken a word since that day. Doctors said it was trauma-induced selective mutism, that he'd talk again when he was ready. But he found a different way to communicate, Rebecca said softly. "Yes, through signing, which I failed to properly learn until you showed up and made me realize how much I was missing." Dominic's expression hardened. "I've spent 2 years having surface-level conversations with my son while he screamed inside his own head, and I didn't even know it." "You know now," Rebecca pointed out. "That's what matters." "Is it?" Dominic's dark eyes found hers. "How do I make up for 2 years of not hearing him? 2 years of him feeling invisible?" "You show up every day and do better," Rebecca said simply. "That's all any parent can do. Make mistakes, learn from them, and try again." Dominic was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the dim hallway light. "You're wise for someone so young." "I'm 32, Rebecca said, slightly defensive. "And I've had to grow up fast." 32, Dominic repeated. "I'm 41. Does that age gap bother you?" The question caught Rebecca off guard. "Why would it bother me? You're my employer." "For now," Dominic said, and the words carried implications that made Rebecca's breath catch. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text. She pulled it out and felt her stomach drop. It was from Mrs. Chen. "Men were here asking about you. Said they were friends, but they scared me. Are you okay?" Rebecca showed the message to Dominic, whose expression went cold and hard. "This is exactly why you're not going back there," he said. "Antonio's making his move, showing me he knows where you live. Reminding me that everyone I care about is vulnerable. I'm not someone you care about." Rebecca protested weakly. Dominic stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Yes," he said quietly, "you are. And that makes you a target whether you accept it or not." Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs. She should be terrified, should be running away from this dangerous man and his complicated world. Instead, she found herself swaying slightly toward him, drawn by something she didn't want to name. "I should go to bed," she whispered. "It's late." "Yes," Dominic agreed, but he didn't move. Neither did she. They stood in the hallway, the air between them charged with tension that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with the awareness crackling between them. Rebecca could see the pulse beating at Dominic's throat, could hear his slightly quickened breathing, could feel the way his eyes traced her face like he was, memorizing every detail. "Good night, Rebecca," Dominic said finally, his voice rough. "Good night," she whispered back. She forced herself to turn away, to walk into her room and close the door. Only then did she allow herself to breathe, to acknowledge the fact that something had shifted tonight. She wasn't just Dante's teacher anymore. She wasn't just an employee. She was becoming something else, something more dangerous and more complicated than she'd ever intended. And as Rebecca changed into the pajamas that had somehow already been placed in her room's dresser, she admitted to herself what she'd been avoiding since yesterday. She was attracted to Dominic Salvatore, to his strength, his vulnerability, his fierce love for his son, to the way he looked at her like she was precious and essential and worth protecting. It was the worst possible complication. The most dangerous thing that could happen. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Rebecca woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and a moment of complete disorientation. The bed was too soft, the sheets too smooth, the ceiling too high. Then memory crashed back. She was in Dominic Salvatore's mansion, having spent her first night under his protection, and based on the delicious smells wafting up from downstairs, someone was making breakfast. Rebecca quickly showered and changed into the clothes she'd worn yesterday, since she had nothing else. She'd have to go back to her apartment at some point to get their things, though based on Dominic's reaction last night, that might be more complicated than she'd hoped. Maya was still asleep, sprawled across the massive bed like a starfish. Rebecca kissed her daughter's forehead and signed, "I'll be right back," even though Maya couldn't see it. Then she made her way downstairs, following her nose, toward what she assumed was the kitchen. The space she found was bigger than her entire apartment and filled with stainless steel appliances that looked like they belonged in a professional restaurant. Maria stood at the stove, expertly flipping what looked like French toast while bacon sizzled in another pan. At the massive kitchen island, Dante and Dominic sat side by side, Dante signing something that had his father laughing. It was the laugh that stopped Rebecca in her tracks. Real, genuine, unguarded. It transformed Dominic's face from dangerous to devastating, carving dimples into his cheeks she hadn't known existed. "Good morning," Maria said warmly, noticing Rebecca hovering in the doorway. "Coffee? Breakfast will be ready in 5 minutes." "Coffee would be amazing," Rebecca admitted, moving into the room. "Thank you." Dante spotted her and immediately began signing. "Good morning. Did you sleep okay? Papa said you and Maya are staying with us for a while. Isn't that great?" Dominic's eyes met hers over his coffee cup, and Rebecca saw the question there. Had she told Maya yet? How was she planning to explain this? "I slept very well, thank you." Rebecca signed back to Dante. "Your house is beautiful. Papa says you're going to teach me every day now," Dante continued, his hands moving with excited energy. "And that Maya can come too. We can have lessons together." "That's the plan," Rebecca confirmed. She moved to the coffee maker where Maria had already poured her a cup, black and strong. "Where's Maya?" "Still sleeping," Rebecca said. "She's not usually an early riser." "Let her sleep," Dominic said. His voice was softer in the morning, rougher, like he hadn't been awake long. "We have nowhere to be today." "Actually," Rebecca said, "I need to get some of our things from the apartment. Clothes, Maya's medications, some of her favorite toys." "Already handled," Dominic said, pulling out his phone and showing her a photo. It was of a team of movers, carefully packing boxes in what Rebecca recognized as her apartment. "I had my people start early this morning. Everything's being cataloged and will be delivered to the Lincoln Park property by tonight." Rebecca felt a surge of irritation. "You didn't think to ask me first? I thought we agreed you weren't going back there. I agreed to stay here last night. I didn't agree to let you make decisions about my life without consulting me." Tension filled the kitchen. Maria suddenly became very focused on her cooking. Dante looked between his father and Rebecca with worried eyes, his hands moving tentatively. "Are you angry at Papa?" Rebecca forced herself to take a breath. This wasn't a conversation to have in front of Dante. "No, sweetheart, I'm not angry. Just surprised. Your papa likes to make big decisions without warning people." "He does that a lot," Dante agreed, which made Dominic's mouth twitch despite the tension. "Can we discuss this privately?" Dominic asked Rebecca, standing. "Dante, eat your breakfast when Maria serves it. We'll be right back." He led Rebecca out of the kitchen and into a smaller sitting room off the main hall. As soon as the door closed, Rebecca turned on him. "You can't just make decisions for me," she said, trying to keep her voice level. "I understand you're trying to help, but I need to have some control over my own life." "Your life was in danger," Dominic said flatly. "Antonio's men were at your apartment. Who knows what they planted while they were there? Bugs, cameras, tracking devices? I'm not letting you go back into a compromised space." The logic made sense, but it was still infuriating. "Then send your security people with me, but don't just take over without asking." Dominic was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "You're right," he said finally. "I should have consulted you. I'm used to making executive decisions and having them followed without question. That's not going to work with you, is it? No, Rebecca said. It's not. I appreciate everything you're doing for me and Maya, but I'm not one of your employees you can just order around. We need to be partners in this, or it won't work. Partners, Dominic repeated, and something shifted in his expression. I can do that. But you need to meet me halfway, Rebecca. When I say something isn't safe, I need you to trust that I know what I'm talking about. I can do that, Rebecca agreed. As long as you explain why instead of just issuing orders. Dominic's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone more intimidated by me, Dominic admitted. Most people are. I'm terrified of you, Rebecca said honestly. But I'm more terrified of not being able to pay my bills or keep Maya safe. Fear is relative. Before Dominic could respond, they heard Maya's voice from the hallway. Mama? Where are you? Rebecca opened the door to find her daughter patting down the brown stairs in her pajamas, her hair a wild nest of curls. Good morning, baby. How did you sleep? So good. That bed is like sleeping on a cloud, Maya signed. Then she noticed Dominic standing behind Rebecca. Good morning, Mr. Salvatore. Dominic's face softened. Good morning, Maya. And please, call me Dominic. Is Dante awake? Can we have breakfast together? He's in the kitchen, Rebecca said. Go ahead. I'll be right there. After Maya scampered off, Rebecca turned back to Dominic. We're okay? We're okay, he confirmed. And Rebecca, thank you. For what? For pushing back. For not just accepting everything I say. I need that. Dante needs that. His dark eyes held hers. We both need someone who isn't afraid to tell us when we're wrong. The words created a warmth in Rebecca's chest that had nothing to do with the coffee she'd drunk. She nodded and headed back to the kitchen, very aware of Dominic following behind her. Breakfast was a surprisingly pleasant affair. The children signed back and forth between bites of French toast, and Rebecca found herself translating for Dominic more naturally now, helping him follow conversations that would have been impossible for him alone. She noticed he was taking mental notes of new signs, his eyes intense as he watched hand shapes and movements. Rebecca Torres, a struggling single mother working double shifts as a waitress, takes her deaf 6-year-old daughter Maya to a Chicago park. There, she notices a young boy crying alone on the swing's 8-year-old Dante, who's been mute since his mother's death 2 years ago. When Rebecca sees him signing desperately to himself, she approaches and communicates with him in ASL, making him smile for the first time in months. Dante's father, Dominic Salvatore, a powerful Mafia boss, is stunned that someone finally understands his son. He offers Rebecca a lucrative position as Dante's private tutor and communication specialist. Despite knowing the dangers of Dominic's warless world, Rebecca accepts, needing the money and unable to walk away from a child who desperately needs her. As Rebecca teaches Dante and helps Dominic learn sign language to communicate with his son, she and Dominic develop intense feelings for each other. But Dominic's uncle Antonio sees Rebecca as a weakness to exploit. He threatens both children and launches attacks on Dominic's operations, forcing Rebecca and Maya to move into Dominic's heavily secured mansion for protection. The conflict escalates when Antonio directly threatens the children. Dominic confronts him at his club, resulting in Antonio's death when he pulls a gun. With the threat eliminated, Dominic proposes to Rebecca, and she accepts, choosing love over fear. 6 months later, they marry in the mansion's garden, officially becoming a blended family. Rebecca becomes Dante's mother, while Dominic embraces Maya as his daughter. A year after the wedding, they welcome baby Isabella, completing their unconventional but deeply loving family. The story celebrates how compassion, communication, and courage can transform broken pieces into something beautiful, proving that family isn't defined by blood, but by the bonds we choose to forge. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel.